Hey, I'm Jim Hutchison with JimOnLight.com. I'm here at the NAB show at the Sea Changer booth with an excellent friend of mine and fantastic lighting designer, T.J. Gerckens. T.J., I'm so glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. One thing that drives me nuts about some of the new technology, though, is some of the new controllers, which I think are really coming along well, the consoles in terms of usability, is that they have these things where, if you want R61, you press this button and it'll mix whatever the profile is to R61. And I think sometimes people stop thinking at that point. And I did a show on the EOS console, and we were using a CXI scroller, and I said, I need Lee 161. They said, okay, that's it. And I looked up at it and said, no, it's not. That's Italian blue. That's probably Roscoe 371. Oh, no, it's not. It says right here, it's Lee 161. I'm like, no, seriously, guys, that's not Lee 161. Well, I don't know what to tell you. It says right here. I said, well, why don't you go get me a Fresnel and a cut of Lee 161, and on the next break, let's put them next to each other. We put them next to each other, and it's like, oh, that's not Lee 161. It's like, yeah. Thanks for letting me know. And on that case, I think it was probably a user problem, an operator problem, because it was their first time on that board. They may not have loaded the right profile.
Sure.
But that mindset of, okay, now this is telling me what color this is, so it must be that color.
It's like a lack of trust.
Yeah, or trusting too much.
Gotcha.
In the technology when my eyes are looking at it and saying, that's not Lee 161 in anybody's book.
Right.
No matter how old it is.
Sure.
So,
well, I think that's some
soapbox over.
Yeah. Well, you can be on the soapbox anytime you're on my show.
Right, thank you.
Whatsoever.
Your soapbox is my soapbox.
Well, I mean, do you find that like emotional attachment to less than saturated colors? I mean, because you talk about 201 and 202 and Lee 160, and there's something about the emotional attachment to magenta and to heavy blue and to Congo and things like that.
Yeah, it is a personal thing, and I do use some saturated colors. I really do.
I know you do.
I've used them before. I also use front light sometimes. People don't believe that, but I also use front light sometimes. But no, there are certain colors that I am attached to, and part of it is because I really know how they behave. And again, a lot of it's about contrast. There may be other colors that would do the same thing for me, but in the combination I'm using them, they create what I want to create.
Sure.
I'm a huge fan of the combination of Lee 103 and R80, or Lee 103 and Lee 119 in a template relationship. The contrast is just, it turns the Lee 103 into gold, and the blue into the bluest blue. And are there other colors that might have been just as good instead of those two? Probably. But I've experimented with them, and I like the richness, and I know what they're going to do. I know how they're going to perform. So,
to educate someone on what we do is such a technical and artistic mix of a process.
Yes.
If you were to give a person who wants to be in this industry, or a person who is maybe in the industry but wants to switch gears into more an artistic role, do you have any advice for those kind of situations? Like deep, and I don't care if it's as easy as hand drafting or I've done calculations for this man, and I'm telling you what, it turned my brain into pink tapioca. So give me some advice if you were to...
Well, honestly, I think the biggest advice and the best way to learn that is by sitting next to somebody who knows how to do it. Again, I've talked about Jim Ingalls, I've talked about Theron Musser, I've sat by Bob Kristen at the Goodman and Bob Shook and Dwayne Schuler, and just watching the way these masters work, and then looking up or looking at the paperwork to see how they create what they're creating. Because I find colors so intensely difficult to talk about. My brother, the computer programmer who I talked about earlier, he works with color from a purely scientific point of view. He works with color rendition on monitors, and he'll talk to me about black body this and all this, and for me, I can't speak that language really.
Sure.
But having watched the way Jim and Theron and Dwayne and Bob and everybody work with these things, you pick up just how it shapes and how it cuts and how it blends and what the emotional impact is. Because again, I think that a person like Jim Ingalls, who I've literally seen use Lee 203 as a warm wash and 202 as a cool wash, and I looked at this and said, the man's high. This is not going to work. And it was beautiful. And the cool lights felt cool and the warm water. And it was the way he was juxtaposing them in the palette. And that same thing might be done by another person with lavender and with a deeper blue. And In the teaching I've done, that's what I found really difficult, is when somebody comes to you with such a different color position. You know, I had a student recently when I was teaching a class who, man, they had to put deep lavender in everything. And, you know, it's just like, why do you keep going to that deep lavender? It's like, well, in here it's conveying tragedy and loss. And I'm like, wow, I don't think of deep lavender as tragedy and loss. You know what I mean? And in a classroom project, you can't tell if it'll work or not unless you get in a lab and set up some tragedy and loss and see if that's what it looks like. But that I think is the hardest thing to teach, and the thing that I think textbooks do a terrible job of. And I don't know how, I've thought about how I would do it differently. And other than getting students in to see masters work and to throw them into light labs, lighting classrooms that don't have a light lab, I don't know how you learn color that way.
It's rough, huh?
You can hold up little swatch books all you want, you know. So.
I am so glad to have seen you again, TJ.
My pleasure.
Guys, this is TJ Gerckens, a lighting designer, freelance LD. I'm Jim Hutchison from JimOnLight.com, and I want to thank you for having me here at the NAB show at Sea Changers booth, and we'll see you next time.